And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you the email that I had originally sent you. So we can just use that as a prompt. And let's see if I can get it to come up here. Okay, so I just want to review all this information to kind of get us started and to bring Aaron up to speed. And so I sent you two lists that are very fundamental to working on getting grants from private foundations, which I think is sort of your main goal at this point, is to learn how to be a grant writer and write grants to private foundations. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I start off by saying also keep in mind that formal grant applications take months before they get you any money. Your short-term best option is large donations, usually around $5,000, from high net worth individuals in your network and sphere of influence. I always ask my board members to list 7 to 10 people in their network who might be generous to the ministry, and then ask them to personally contact each one and then hold the board member accountable for doing so. So if you had, like I think you said you had 3 board members and they each had 7 people that they could think of that might give a large donation, and then they work that list, you might get $5, $10, $15, $20,000 coming in for your ministry, without a whole lot of effort. So that's some good seed money to get you some money in the bank. You know what I'm saying? So, so that was just a point of, if you need quick money, that's the quick way to do it that I know that I recommend. The main list below is or that's attached, that we'll look at in a minute, is the most common questions you'll be asked on a typical grant application. Having all these answers well thought out and well written is how you make your case for why foundations and wealthy people should invest in your vision and your mission. That is why the set of answers you come up with is called the case statement. You're making your case for giving to your organization. So that questionnaire is attached. We're going to go through that in a minute. Then the second list is all the documents that you will need to have on hand as PDF files in order to meet the requirements of the typical grant application, where it says, please attach this, please attach that to your application. So used to, you were typing up documents, letters, and things, and you would mail in a packet to the foundation. They don't do that anymore. I haven't done one of those in years. Okay. Maybe the federal government might do that, but not private foundations. They're all online. And so now some will say, no application required, Rochelle. Send us a letter. They want to start the conversation by you sending them a letter. So that would be a regular letter. They typically don't publish an email address in that case, and they just say, send us a letter. That's all they'll say. And then they give you their regular mailing address. In that case, we would have what's called a letter of inquiry, which I will teach you about at some point, where you start the conversation by saying, we hear that you might be interested in giving in our particular sector, and we would love to have that conversation with you. Here's some information about us. And so you would send them a simple one-page letter saying, per your request, here's the letter you've requested. And then you might attach a brochure, or they may say, send us a letter and attach your 501c3 letter, from the IRS, something simple, but that would be something you would mail in. It's usually 1 or 2 or 3 pages, not a big deal. That's not an application. That's a letter to start the conversation. That's fairly common. I'd say maybe about a third of the foundations, they don't have a website, they don't have an online process, and they want to start by looking at you from your letter. And in that letter, you might refer them to your website or something, where they can learn more about who you are. But you would also ask them for a phone conversation, because, when you can build a relationship with these people, that's where your best results are going to come from. Just sending off online applications to faceless organizations that don't know you and you don't know them, that can work, but it doesn't work that often, right? So we like to build relationships along the way if we have the opportunity. Okay, but when you're doing an online application, you may have seen this already, but they have a long web page or series of web pages that you got to fill out all these questions, right? You know, what's your mission? What's your vision? Who's on your board? What's your budget? You'll have these standard questions. But then they'll say, now upload a copy of this, a copy of that, a copy of the other. All right. So you're filling out questions online on a website, but then you're also uploading files to support your application. And then you're going to submit all of that online. Does that make sense? You're frozen. Does that make sense, Rochelle?
Yes.
Okay. Rochelle, you're frozen. Are you there? I've lost Rochelle. Can you hear me, Rochelle?
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Did what I say make sense about the online process?
Yes, absolutely. Everything. This
Okay, good.
information was very helpful
Good.
in helping us to get all of the information that we needed in
Right.
order.
Right.
And as you said, what happens is without all the information, it's harder for anyone to get the support that they're looking for.
Well, they won't, if you don't upload the stuff they ask for, they won't even qualify you. You won't even
Right.
make it in the door, you know? So, you know, I've seen typically 7 or 8 attachments would be required on a given application. Maybe one of them is optional, but the rest are all required. You know, you got to have them, or you can't even submit the application. It won't even go.
Right.
Right. Okay. So I sent you a list of the typical documents that you need to have to sort of have your act together and be prepared. Right. And it's the org chart, the organizational overview, job descriptions and bios of key leaders, board member financial contributions, current financial statements, your IRS letter of determination, or also known as your 501c3 letter, your most recent audited financial statements, which typically startups don't have that. You'll have that later on when you're, you know, further along. Most recent IRS 990 form. Every nonprofit has to turn in a 990 every year. Small organizations can do a 990 EZ, which is very easy to do. But whatever you did last, you know, if you're brand new, you don't have one yet. But each, you know, you need to keep that 990 letter. I mean, a form, whatever you turn in each year, you need to keep a copy of it as a PDF file so you can upload it later on when they ask for it. Okay. Your organizational budget for the current fiscal year, your bylaws, an IRS form W-9, which a lot of people require. It's like if you were a contractor to get paid by a client, you'd have a W-9 form. You tell them what your tax ID is so they can issue you a check to get paid. Well, foundations require that of nonprofits so they can pay you. If they're ready to pay you, they want to do it under the IRS protocol or whatever. So that's a W-9 form. It's always good to have one of those. I can help with that. And then a roster of who your board directors are. Excuse me, directors of the board are. Okay, so these are in alphabetical order mostly, not priority, but I'm sorry, they're in random order. But you don't have to have all of these up front. You will eventually need all of these if you're going to be mature in your work, right? But there's some priorities here we can work through which ones you need to be working on first. Really, it's if you're working on a grant application today, they're going to tell you what they need, you know, and
Right.
those are the ones you're going to have to get first, right? The first grant application you do is going to dictate what's your priority. Any questions about that?
No, actually, no. This is very good information, and in actually putting all of it together, then you can actually we are able to see exactly where we are and
Yes.
where we stand, and it actually helps us to be better when we look for funding and go for funding because you know, all of the funding organizations
Right.
tell you exactly what they want. And then if you look at your paperwork, does it fit within
Right.
their guidelines? And it saves you a lot of time with thinking you can apply for something that you actually cannot apply for, or knowing that you can apply for something that's out there. So it works real good.
Well, also, if you'll allow me to use a little bit of street language, you got to be a player, okay? You got to get
Right.
out there and be a player because grant funding is very competitive, right? And if you're going to play at the higher level, these are the marks of a player, right? If you have your act together and you have all this, it shows that you're an organized professional nonprofit, not just some little startup running around. Most people, they run around with their hat in their hand, Rochelle, saying, "We love Jesus, give us some money." That's about their whole approach. That's not going
Right.
to cut it out there with these big foundations. It's just not. They want to see that you got some business sense and some organization behind your ministry, right? Does that make
Yes.
sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to get you up to being playing at the professional level. Okay. So let's look at the handout. I mean, the attachment. These are all the things. If you'll fill out this form, and it's not easy, Rochelle, it's not like falling off a log. If you'll fill out all the answers to these, how many questions it is, 32 questions, legal name of the organization, mailing address, physical address, all the details, right? You're going to have all this to fill. These are the questions that they're going to ask you on an online grant application. So you might as well just answer them now. You don't have to sit there and think about it every time. Go ahead and fill this out. And that way you can just copy and paste the answers right into their website. It's so handy. It's so much easier to write grants if you have all this pre-written. So you've probably reviewed all that. You probably, you seem like you're pretty organized already. You probably have about half of this information at least already in hand. You just got to put it into this document, right? So it's handy. But you want to work over, and I'll help you, I'll coach you, whatever I need to do, but you need to come up with answers for every single one of these questions in the next, 2 to 4 weeks. We ought to bear down and make sure you've got this document filled out.
Now on this form is really helpful because you have if you scroll up just a little bit, you have the purpose description.
Right.
You have a statement of purpose, and
Yep.
then up under the statement of purpose, it's a purpose description.
Right.
Right. And then before that, it's a program description. And that was a little difficult because you have the organizational description, the program description,
Right.
then the vision statement,
Right.
and then a mission statement. Yeah, and then
Okay. Well, let me help you with that part. Okay.
Okay.
So those are great questions. So an organizational description, number 14, is just one sentence. This is
Okay.
what we do, right? That's very similar to your mission statement. But a mission statement is very succinct. Okay. In corporate America, they say your mission statement needs to be like 10 words or less, right? Where you really distill it down to something with a lot of punch. This is what we're called to do. Boom, right?
Right.
It's very clear and it's compelling and maybe sort of unique. Maybe you use some unique words so you stand out from everybody else, right? So your mission statement is a kind of a catchphrase. It's a very short, powerful phrase. That's the way I've learned to do it. Your organizational description is that same thought, but maybe in a longer, more conversational sentence. A little more elaborated, a little more in everyday speech, not like some power. It's not a power mission statement. It's more of like, this is what we do in a conversational tone. Okay. Then your statement of purpose is when they say, tell us more about your, tell us more about your mission. A statement of purpose is where you elaborate on what you do, what you're called to do. And a lot of times they'll leave up to 1,500 characters for that answer. So you have a lot of room to really explain what you do. Okay. So mission statement is the shortest. Then the organizational description is one nice long sentence. And then a statement of purpose might be 2 or 3 paragraphs to really elaborate on because not everybody asks for that. But if they do, you ought to have a very nice sounding story to tell, right, about what your purpose is, right? Then the program description is where if you have multiple programs, well, we got a men's program, a women's program, a children's program, each one of those needs to have its own description. You want to have a nice, concise description of each program within the organization, right? So the organization has a purpose, but then each program has a description. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then when it says purpose or description of grant request, this is the core or the meat of answering the question, why should we give money to your organization? So that's when you're asking, that's when you tie all that to money. Because we're doing this, we need, $10,000 to do this program for this next 12 months or whatever, where you get very specific about what the money is going to do for your organization. The other stuff is generic, just, this is what we do in general, right? But when they say, what's the purpose of this grant, then you better tie what you do to a specific amount of money for a specific amount of time.
So at the statement of the purpose, we can do, as you say, which is a great example because it's what we do, the men's program, the women's program, the children's program.
Right.
However, so we would write that in section 20, but then in 21, all we want funding for is the children's program.
Right.
So that's all we put down there.
Right. Because that funder might only give to children's program. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because the vision statement and the mission statement are, a little close to each other.
Well, no, not necessarily. But the reason you would have money for a specific program, Rochelle, is because that funder might only give to children's programs. They don't even care about your men's or women's programs, right? You're going to them to help with the children because that's all they do. That's why you need to be specific, right? You've got to match up your program specifically with their target that they give to.
Okay.
Now a vision statement, I haven't talked about that. People get those confused. A vision statement is something very different than a mission statement. A mission statement says what you do. A vision statement says we envision a future where such and such will be the case. In other words, you need to tell them what your vision of the future is. If we do our mission, then we believe our neighborhoods are going to be better, our families are going to be stronger, our community will be more collaborative or trusting or whatever, right? There'll be more justice. You want to have kind of paint an inspiring vision of the future that you guys are shooting for, and because you want them to catch that vision with you. If they'll come alongside as a partner, then they've got to have that same vision as you. And if they don't have that vision, they're not for you, right? I mean, you want people who get it, right? Who get what you're doing and who want to underwrite what you're doing. You're trying to describe what you're doing clearly so they can either say, yeah, we do that, or no, we don't. That makes it a lot easier for them if you're clear.
Okay, great. And then the organizational values statement.
Right. Sometimes this isn't that common, but they'll say, what are your values? Well, we value collaboration. We value unity. We value, whatever some values, some high sounding values are that define you. You better have a good answer.
A bullet point.
Say again.
That's like a bullet point of the values.
Right. Or you might say we value unity because unless we all pull together, none of this is going to happen. You might have a little statement for that value. But you got to have 4 or 5 or 6 good organizational values.
Core values.
That really, your core values that define who you are.
Yeah.
They're trying to triangulate on who you are, right? What you're about. So you're trying to help them do that. So I am out of time. Unfortunately, I got about 1 more minute.
Okay, that's good.
But
just scroll it down just a little bit. I mean, I know I have a copy.
Right. So just guessing
everything looks
about
fine.
How much of this do you think you guys have already thought out? Do you think you have half of this already maybe in the work you've been doing?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I will help you over time. We'll get all this making you look amazing. My job is to make you look like a rock star. Okay. But what we want to answer these questions, Rochelle, but then we want to make sure that your board kind of weighs in and reads over it. And because you want everybody to be in agreement that these are our official answers to these questions. You want to be saying the same thing on your website, your brochure, your grant applications, everywhere. You want to think this is the official language of your organization. These are the way you're going to say things. You want to be saying it consistently across your organization. You don't want your board to say your mission's one thing and your website says something different. That's not right. So this is a way to kind of force some unity and some consistency on the organization by going through this, answering that, and then making sure everybody says this from now on. Right. This is, and keeping it updated. Some of this stuff doesn't change, but some of it will evolve over time. So you got to keep this language updated. And then if you can master this case statement, you've conquered most of grant writing. This is 80% of grant writing right here, is having good answers to these questions.
Okay, great. It's been very helpful.
Okay.
And
Well, we'll spend a whole hour next week.
okay, it's real helpful because each one of the categories, they just make you think a little outside the box of what you would
Right.
normally think it would be. And now you have to put everything in the little boxes
Right.
and